Hey, so I watched Bernadette Banner's video on the Wicked films earlier today, where she uses these two films as if they're primary sources that tell us that historians can use to tell us about the history, the society, the geography, the culture of this place, Oz. I think it's a fabulous video. It's a lot of fun to watch. I think it's really cool to use historians' tools and apply them to fictional works. It's like fun for like a teaching tool, but also just like is a great thing to do if you're a big history nerd. I too am a history nerd. I'm an environmental historian, and there were a couple of things from the video that I really appreciated and wanted to expand upon. I really love the way that Bernadette Banner in her videos is able to talk about how clothes, how dress, in its materials, in its dyes, in its cut, can tell you about the economics, the labor, and for me, as someone who's interested in environmental history, the material relationship between a society and the world around it. So, like, I loved all this stuff about Winkies and dyeing and the potential of, sentient speaking animals, like sheep, wanting to like sell their wool and the importance of wool in this society. Like it's great to be able to kind of pull this stuff out of fictional films. And I think this process works really well for a dress historian like Bernadette Banner, because although the text is light on like normal historical detail, we're not getting close-ups of a lot of documents and things that a lot of historians would look at. There are a lot of costumes. There are a lot of clothes. And so you can, as she does, look at Game of Thrones, you can look at Wicked, you can look at all these things and see the actual things that people are wearing as text. It's so cool. So she has a whole section on the environment in Oz, and its relationship to agriculture and things like that. Fascinating stuff about like how all the rivers disappear underground, which implies, according to some like geology colleagues she has, environmental science colleagues she has, that there's a system of caverns under Oz. That's amazing to think about. And also this great desert that surrounds Oz. That would imply that Oz should not be as wet as it is. Like there shouldn't be marshes and rivers. Like there's no ocean nearby. And so the climate of Oz being this like seemingly lush agrarian community doesn't really make sense because it's surrounded by this desert. And so there must be something, either like big mountains or berms around the land that are keeping the water from flowing out, or some sort of magic. And so I want to dig into that climate stuff. Because it's really important to the world of Oz and to the world of these films, in relation to the Great Drought and the status of animals. So Bernadette talks about how animals, like you can kind of read through the text that a lot of them were academics, especially in the fields of like medicine, midwifery, nursing, as well as agriculture, and that they were quite intertwined with these parts of society. But in between the years of like the late 400s, 452 is when second to last Ozma, Ozma the Scarcely Beloved, comes in. She imposes taxes that lead to, this is like the way that Bernadette says, lead to bad farming practices that lead to the Great Drought, or the effects of the Great Drought. And that creates this division between the animals and human society, because animals are associated with agriculture through their expertise, and so they are blamed in some way for the Great Drought. And I want to pick at that because I think there's more there. I think that, one, labor practices do not cause drought. Like there's a note on this chalkboard that this is kind of similar to the Dust Bowl, which is, I think, relevant because Kansas and Nebraska were states that were affected quite severely by the Dust Bowl during the time period where this is set. I think talk to Donald Worcester about that, but like those were bad land stripping farming practice, breaking up the prairie with the assumption that it was always going to be raining a lot in these areas that were more recently settled, and colonizers did not understand the climate of these places, so they're breaking up the land when it wasn't rainy, when rain didn't follow the plow as was assumed, led to like an almost desertification of this area of the United States, and led to a lot of people like going hungry, having to emigrate, very poor farmers. Great history. Again, Donald Worcester's The Dust Bowl if you want to learn more about it. Great environmental history. But that's not the case in Oz. Oz, this land has been settled for a long time. People would have understood the climate. And even if there were less experienced farmers that were employing practices that would have made them vulnerable to agricultural disaster should the climate change, should some sort of environmental disaster happen, those practices themselves don't cause drought. Drought is something else. And it's a meteorological phenomenon, right? So even though the Ozma the Scarcely Beloved's taxes would have created poorer farming practices, the drought happened some other way. And so this is kind of what I want to dig into, is the relationship between the wizard, Madame Morrible, and this drought. In the film, we understand that Madame Morrible she's able to read the grimoire. She has some magical ability, but she's not super great. She can only read a couple words. And as we know, the grimoire is kind of like a monkey's paw sort of book, where whenever you try to cast a spell, things will go awry. Like when Elphaba tries to make the monkeys fly, they grow these painful wings. When she tries to save Bok's life, she turns into the Tin Man. Same with Fiyero becoming the Scarecrow. Nothing happens the way you want. And there's some ambiguity in the timeline that's drawn out in that Bernadette researched. So Ozma the Scarcely Beloved comes in after Ozma the Librarian, I think. So that's around 452 Oz time. Again, Oz time is different than Earth time. It operates on weird rules that we don't understand. So all these things are a bit strange in their time. Like it's not, the spans are different, and we don't really know. The wizard arrives officially in 502 from Winky Country, but Bernadette is looking into, and from her conclusions, he had been coming back and forth a little bit before that time and had been going to Munchkinland instead and trying to like bring things there, trying to maybe set up some sort of business, some sort of state fair. This is when he meets Elphaba's mother, all this stuff. And let my brain catch up with my mouth real quick. So also between this period, so between 452 and 502, the Great Drought happens. I would assume closer to the 500s than the 450s. The Great Drought causes the desert to be formed, all this stuff. We know that Madame Morrible's magic is weather-focused. We see her creating the tornado that, or the cyclone that drops the house, Dorothy's house, on Nessa Rose, Elphaba's sister. Like, her hair is all storm cloud looking. And I think that it could go either way. It could be like Madame Morrible was messing with magic and playing with the weather, and that caused the wizard to arrive. Or Madame Morrible, like the wizard arrived and Madame Morrible was trying to send him back and forth and therefore was messing with the weather. But I believe that it was actually Madame Morrible that caused the Great Drought. I think that's kind of implied by the film. Because this drought was so bad, and we know it wasn't the animals, and we also know, like, it wasn't farming practices. Those may have exacerbated it, but this weather thing happened differently. It was climatological. And the reason I believe it's Madame Morrible, I think it's just kind of, like, there in the subtext, but I can't really, like, just say it's there. I don't think the weather really changes in Oz. Like, from what we're shown, there doesn't really ever seem to be, like, rainy days or cloudy days. Like, it just seems to be quite stable and sunny the whole time. This is also kind of, like, feeds into the fact that, like, people believe that Elphaba will be melted by water. Like, that is only really true, or that helps if it never rains, you know? You never see Elphaba get wet because it never rains. There's never water falling from the sky, or very rarely. So if she's never gotten wet before, then maybe it's easier to spread that rumor. But the real, it's not a smoking gun. It's just speculation. But in the second film, after the storm happens and the house gets dropped on Nessa Rose, Glinda and Elphaba are having this fight. And Elphaba says, you think cyclones just appear out of the blue, kind of implying to Glinda that she knows that Madame Morrible did this. That's what it implies. You know, it's meant to tell the audience she knows that Madame Morrible did this. But there's also something in there, like, because cyclones do appear out of the blue. They're weather. Weather just happens. And so I think there's something in Elphaba saying this that's meant to imply that in Oz, unlike on Earth, weather doesn't just happen. We only see these sunny days. If Elphaba grows up in a world post the Great Drought where the weather is always still and sunny, which are drought conditions, then she wouldn't think of, oh, a cyclone just so happened to happen. Because it doesn't. Because weather never happens. It is only made to happen by magic. And we don't know that much about how agriculture works. We're shown a lot of tulip fields, but we don't really actually know, like, are there irrigation systems? Are they pulling water from the lakes? Whatever. Or is the wizard somehow making it rain regularly, scheduling these rain events with the help of Madame Morrible? So what I believe is the actual cause of the Great Drought is that Madame Morrible was messing with the Grimoire, trying to do something with the weather. Maybe she was trying to improve the conditions, maybe she was trying to make a storm to bring the wizard to Oz, but in trying to change the weather, because the Grimoire is this monkey's paw situation, whatever spell she cast ended up stopping all weather altogether in Oz, making it so it's always blue skies, partly cloudy, sunny. In other words, drought conditions. And so in trying to improve the weather, she led to this great drought, and then she has to control the weather. Now her job is to figure out how to make it rain, how to make storms happen, all this stuff. And so if the wizard is arriving around this time, it makes sense that the animals would not just be scapegoated because of their association with the weather, but that this would be an opportunity for Madame Morrible, who might be working with the wizard at this early stage, to escape blame herself, and to put it onto the animals, while she and the wizard are able to sort of start to build something new. Centralize power in the Emerald City, and as Bernadette says, like, if the wizard is able to just, like, snap his fingers and create drought conditions again, make sure it never rains in Munchkin Land if there's an uprising there, that's a lot of power. So I think it's implied through all this that, like, Madame Morrible and the wizard conspired to scapegoat the animals together because Madame Morrible herself was the cause of the drought. And so Glinda and Elphaba and all these characters of this younger generation only know sunny skies, and so therefore a cyclone is a huge event and not a natural one. I think when the storm happens, you see the like residents of Oz like scrambling. They're not dressed for the weather. They're all like, it's emergency conditions across Oz. And so I think it's not too far-fetched to say that this is some sort of magical thing. And I think, Bernadette talks about how like maybe there's a magical barrier that is keeping Oz stable and keeping the desert from affecting Oz. It might just all be the same spell. So the reason I think this is interesting, beyond just like it's a fun project to think about The Wizard of Oz and Wicked this way, is that I think it brings in a little bit of a climate change metaphor. Obviously, drought is climate change. It is a change in the climate conditions. And if we put the blame on it, if we center Madame Morrible as the agent that caused this natural disaster, possibly with the wizard's intervention, then we have kind of an interesting metaphor for anthropogenic climate change. That Oz in the era of the wizard is not just this like technological era and this era of kind of like fascist oppression of animals. It's also the Anthropocene. Like it's also this era in which Madame Morrible has messed with the climate and now she has to manage it entirely herself. And I think that's really interesting. So I wanted to add that to this canon of Wicked historiography. I hope you enjoyed this. If you haven't watched Bernadette's video, go watch it. And I have one last tidbit, actually. I was looking up to see if anyone else had like thought about this, and I came across an article by this meteorologist, Jonathan Bells, which I'll also link below. And he has like all of these little weather Easter eggs, like Madame Morrible's hair, the heel of they're not the ruby slippers, but Nessa Rose's slippers is like spirally like a tornado. He says like, if you turn Elphaba's hat upside down because of the like spiral pattern, it's also kind of tornado looking. He also points out that though the original Wizard of Oz film had the tornado going, it was cyclonic. So the way tornadoes work is in the northern hemisphere, they mostly go one way, they rotate one way, which is cyclonic. And then in the southern hemisphere, they mostly rotate anticyclonic, tornadoes and hurricanes and things. So in the original film, the tornado is cyclonic, but in the Wicked films, it's anticyclonic, which wouldn't happen most of the time, as I understand, in the northern hemisphere. So the fact that it's an anticyclonic storm implies for Jonathan that this is a magical storm, that it's like something about the magic that Madame Morrible is causing this to happen that makes it unusual, even on Earth in Kansas. So yeah, I'll link that in the bottom as well. I hope you enjoyed this.